This is the part of investing and wealth building that no one wants to talk about because it has everything to do with what you do with your finances when you're ready to pass it on. In this video, I'm going to go over estate planning. Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Maoli Vodi with financiallypresent.com, your one-stop shop for financial and investment education. And in today's video, we're going to go over the 3 different ways to do estate planning or contingency planning. And there are some other nuances involved, and I'm going to do another video in regards to that. But these 3 ways will allow you, on whatever budget you're on, to have some contingency plans in place so that when the inevitable happens to you, your loved ones and your beneficiaries will not completely be left to dry. The first and most budget-friendly option for estate planning or contingency planning, and it's because it's free, is putting beneficiaries on your account. Yes, it's that simple. So when you open up an investment account or even a bank account, you need to list beneficiaries. You would need this information: their name, their date of birth, their address, and their social security number. These are very critical because they all put together allow you to identify that specific person. And generally, there's not going to be a contest on who that person is when you match all of that information together. Because when someone's born, of course, they can't change that information, and they can't change their date of birth. Socials, I guess technically that can change, but it is very rare. But ultimately, this helps identify an individual so that if something were to happen to you, it goes to them. You would be surprised how many people open up accounts and maybe they don't have that person's information to list them as a beneficiary, or they're just not sure if they want them to be a beneficiary. And they never come back to actually listing them on their account. And if something were to happen to you now, those funds and those assets would be what we call escheated to the state. They are left behind, and if unclaimed, the state that you live in would now own the assets, whether it's cash or stock and other investments. Listing beneficiaries is extremely easy, and if you have a change of heart, all you have to do is update the paperwork at your local broker or your bank stating that here's my new beneficiary, and it would supersede the previous person listed. Okay, so if you have a change of heart, you can easily change it. It's free and at no cost to you. Just, it's a matter of doing it. Some people would ask, well, how do I split it up? You want to make sure that there's 100%, and you can split it 2 ways, 3 ways, 4 ways. I've seen people split it 5 or even 10 ways across grandchildren. So it's very, very simple to do. You just have to have all that information for all of the beneficiaries. And then I recommend telling those beneficiaries. You have to let them know, especially if you know that you're not going to change them. Say, hey, if something happened to me, you would be a beneficiary of this account. So as long as they know that and they know what business to go to, then they will be good to go. And you have to be mindful that there are going to be some differences in the tax implications once something does happen to you and you pass away and those assets are now owned by the beneficiaries. They, of course, have to go into those offices and now state that, hey, I am the proper beneficiary, and there's always going to be some required work involved or paperwork, and you would have to identify yourself, and that's it. The second way is a little bit more of a budget-friendly option, but it's not quite free. It would be to have a will, a living will, and I'd say it costs about maybe between $200 to $400 to have a will created for you. There are templates online that you can find, maybe through like legalzoom.com, or you can work with a lawyer to get this done, and their fees may vary, of course, but this is a slightly more budget-friendly option if you want things dictated a little bit differently, because with a will, you can state how you want things divvied up amongst your beneficiaries, or how you want things to go when things are left behind. You'll have to be aware, though, that this form or this paperwork needs to be notarized, and the original copies need to be available, okay? And when you're having this notarized, you're gonna have to have some witnesses. I know when I had mine done, I had a couple neighbors just show up or knock on their door, tell them, hey, can you take a look? Because we're gonna have someone notarize this, and if something were to happen, this is the document. And it probably took about 5 minutes max because they just bring ID, and it was done right at my home through a mobile notary. One of the good things about a will is that it spans across more than just your investment accounts. It can include other assets and things, whether it's how your home is going to be managed and things of that nature. But there are some additional steps, because if something happens to you, or when something happens to you, your will still needs to be taken by your beneficiaries to the court to ensure that they are indeed a beneficiary. So it has to be certified by the court. Okay, it's not an automatic done deal. Additionally, there can be fees involved for your beneficiaries to do that process at court, to avoid the assets under your name going into probate. Okay, so you want to make sure that they are aware, hey, my will is located in this location, so when something happens to me, I do have a will in place. You want to let people know. Again, you can include different instructions as far as your home, or who takes care of your kids if they're still minors. Like, all of this can be done within a will. There is a process or a lag between the time of your passing and all of this going on, but ultimately this legal document provides those instructions, and they would need to essentially get them certified by the court. You want to make sure that when you're doing something like a will, you are working with a lawyer or a legal website that you can get this done properly. All right, there is one more thing I'm going to get into, but before I do that, I want to go over the question of the day. Do you have beneficiaries on all of your accounts, and do they know? It's extremely important, because this kind of goes hand in hand. If something happens to you, you want to make sure that someone's aware and that they know where to retrieve these assets or how to manage this properly. You could leave behind, say, a home or a mortgage. You can leave behind debt, and these assets can be able to resolve that. If you don't have beneficiaries and they aren't current, why is that? Is it because you're still thinking about it? Is it something that you're still working through? That's something that you have to figure out, and I would say leave some questions in the comments about whether or not it's important to you to have beneficiaries or use a will. All right, and the third way to do estate planning in terms of just from a simplistic standpoint is to create a trust. All right, so a trust, I've seen it range, from $1,000 to about $7,000. It really depends, but generally it would require a lawyer. And there are different types of trusts you can create. There are three main types. There's revocable trust, irrevocable, and then testamentary. So that's for when you pass, how things should operate. But trusts are very unique because they are not a person. They are a legal entity that cannot die. Okay, and a lot of us, what we like to say is a trust is a way that you can rule your assets from the grave. You provide a list of instructions in the trust, and that trust, you would now have to open up an account in that trust title, and the trustee or the manager of that trust or the executor of that trust, it all depends on the type, they by law are required to do as the trust says. So for example, you could have a cousin who is not even a beneficiary of your assets become the executor or the manager of your trust, because they may have the know-how, but they may not have a financial interest, so they are somewhat impartial, right? And they can manage it for you. By law, they are required to if they are listed as the trustee of the account, and they have to manage it in that fashion. If they step outside of the boundaries of the trust and start doing things with the assets incorrectly, then they can be held liable legally. The key with a trust is to make sure that when you open up a trust account, you move assets into the trust account, because it's about the titling. So for example, if you had John Doe revocable trust and you open up that account, you put some money in there and you did some investments, but you forgot to take your John Doe individual brokerage account or individual or even joint account and forgot to move assets into that trust, those assets are going to be dependent on whether or not there's a beneficiary on those accounts and not under trust rules or the trust laws, because they're not within that entity. So it's really important where if you spend all that money, you get a lawyer and you create a trust, that you actually put the assets into the trust. That way it's managed properly and under the trust rules. All right, so those are the three main ways that you can have some estate planning or contingency planning with your assets going forward. What are your thoughts? It can be very, very simple, or it can be very, very expensive. It really all depends on your situation and what works best for you and your budget. In the next video in this series, I'm gonna make sure that I do additional contingency planning concepts, especially looping in insurance, because that's also a big part into your investment strategy and what you're gonna do leading towards building generational wealth and supporting the ones you love. If you like this video, go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the page, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss out on future videos. And until next time, stay present.